Hello, we're here today at the Cinnamon Club with Chef Vivek Singh, and I'm going to ask him a couple of questions about his journey to where we are today. Chef, where do your love for food come from?
So where my love for food came from is very hard to pin down because I have memories. I have memories of being surrounded by very good food and lots of people for a long time. So I have really good memories of that. One of it is about my dad cooking an alfresco meal once a year out in the open. It's funny how my mom cooked 364 days of the year, 3 meals a day. And I don't remember any of that stuff. And I always go back to this one meal once a year that my dad used to cook. But this was a very rustic meal that would happen once a year. So that was one of my earliest food memories. My love for food, I think, comes from the love for cooking, but also more importantly, the love of feeding. That is something I suspect that I found from my mother as well. Because she was somebody who had the reputation, at least in my friends circle when we were growing up, she had a reputation that if you kept your mouth open long enough to yawn, she would come put some food inside. So that's how she loved to feed people. I suspect I inherited some of that. If I have to think of another incident or another occasion in my life when I absolutely fell in love with food, was me attending a Bengali wedding as probably a 7, maybe 8-year-old. There was an event that my parents couldn't go to, so they stuck a 5 rupee note in an envelope and sent me to go and attend. And I went to this Bengali wedding and we sat down there and I walked up to the stage to the bride and the groom. I gave them a 5 rupee, and I headed straight for that marquee where they were serving food. Sat down there and they were kind of serving on thalis, lots of food coming, one after the other. I learned about sequence that day. I also learned about how they were feeding so many people. And, your general instinct would be to, as a host, you like people to eat as less as possible so you can feed more people. You don't have to worry, but that was completely different. They kept bringing in more food and kept offering it to you, insisting that you eat a bit more. Have another rasagulla, have another fried fish. The dish that really stuck with me was this. It was a prawn malai curry. Probably my first time ever eating prawn in a really delicate sort of coconut and cardamom curries. My earliest childhood memory that made me fall in love with food is still probably one of my favorite dishes to cook. And very rarely, also sometimes from time to time, put it in the restaurant menus.
Did you always know that you wanted to be a chef?
I really didn't know I wanted to be a chef. I knew I loved food. I loved eating. I loved celebrating. I loved everything that was related to feasts and food and friends, family celebrations. But I didn't know I wanted to be a chef. I don't think I knew even when I was finishing my hotel school that I wanted to be a chef. I suspect at that point probably chefing chose me as much as I chose chefing.
Oh, very interesting. What inspired you to move to London?
It was a series of things that on my journey took me to other places as well. And as much as I loved cooking Indian food and I wanted to cook Indian food, I was also getting a little stifled with the lack of experimentation, perhaps lack of opportunities to express myself. I wanted to do more. And at the time, the Cinnamon Club was presented as an opportunity. Of all the places, I did a bit of research. Of all those places in the world that you could go and cook Indian food, there were few better than London. And I still think there are few places better than London for Indian food. So yeah, at the very least, I didn't have to teach people how to differentiate between a tikka and a tikka masala or a naan. I didn't have to train people any of that stuff. People knew there was already a lot of love. So when the opportunity presented to do something different that hadn't been done before, that's how love was.
Once you moved here, what was your first few years like? Setting up restaurant, the early years of trying to make a name for Cinnamon Club in specifically modern Indian cuisine, so it's not traditional Indian cuisine that people are used to?
That's right. I think it wasn't that there weren't Indian restaurant, so there wasn't an affection or an appetite. Much to be, to the contrary, there was so much love for Indian food and all things Indian, most things Indian actually. In the early days, I didn't understand it as much. I thought people didn't want to change. I just thought people had a certain idea about Indian food or Indian restaurants or Indian dining. Actually, that's not right. The term Indian dining didn't quite exist in those days. So it was all about, you go to a restaurant, you go for a curry, it's a Friday night ritual, and so on and so forth. Much like a trusty old friend, people loved India and loved all things Indian, or perhaps like a trusty old friend, didn't quite give it the respect that it deserved. So that was one of the things that stood out for me, that for us to change people's perception of Indian food, we had to do something very different. And the fact that anything that would stop us from doing things different was, in the longer term, going to be at the detriment of the cuisine. So we set aside every preconceived notion about, be it poppadoms and chutneys or whatever it is that stopped people from exploring further or being more adventurous, was not going to be our friend. And therefore, we set aside those notions and we set out on this adventure of trying to give people a new adventure, a new experience that maybe in a lot of cases, even they didn't know they wanted. But this is what we want to give people. So there was a challenge, but there's nothing without a challenge.
Was getting people to embrace it the biggest challenge you faced at the time?
True. In many ways, there were people, as much as they loved India, they loved going out for a curry, as it was called in those days. One of the things that I must have heard dozens, if not scores of times, was that, we know our Indian food, we know India. We don't expect much from a curry. But it was just the norm. People would say, well, you love my curry. I know my Rogan Josh or whatever it was. We don't expect much from a curry, And the other question that would often get asked a lot was, it was a great experience. I've never had duck before in an Indian restaurant. Or I've never had halibut or never had sana in those days in an Indian restaurant. So it was very good. It's not very authentic, is it? And for years, it grated with me the fact that, I grew up in India. I'd come here at the age of 28, 29. I was born in India. I had experiences. Why isn't my food Indian enough for you? That was one. And perhaps the more important question was, if it isn't Indian enough, why must it be? Because the whole point of this was, the whole point of the Cinnamon Club, the whole point of the Cinnamon Club experience was that it was setting a new benchmark in Indian cuisine anywhere in the world. It had the liberty and it had the audacity and it had the ambition to be different from anything and everything else.
So that was the thought process that also went into building your very first menu at the Cinnamon Club?
Very much so. So the thought process around that was, here we were, we were not just there to celebrate great Indian spice theme or very traditional, authentic Indian curries. We were also there to celebrate great quality British produce and seasonal cooking, and having menus that were short enough to be changed 6 times a year, or for that matter, changed every night if the opportunity presented itself. In fact, for the first 5 or 6 years, I changed the menu every night at the Cinnamon Club. So I knew, my suppliers would get in touch with me and say, look, we bought a lot of lobster. I've got some finest Scotch halibut coming, it's a great price. You like to put it on the menu? And I did take it, and because I could, and I put it on the menu. This sort of ability to be nimble, to be able to change things, to be working so closely with your farmers, your markets, and your suppliers, it's something that, not many people have. And so I can seize that. And there was this thing about kind of, constantly looking at ways in which people could have something that they may have an idea for, but more importantly also go on to a new adventure, go and experience something that they never experienced before. Or both of us, there was this Indian heritage, the spicing, cooking techniques, and everything else that we so much loved. but also celebrating finest produce. And if that meant that, for really good produce to show that you needed to adapt your cooking method, so be it. So this ability to be able to bring together the best of both worlds was something that I was having a lot of fun with. And looking back at it, I think a lot of other people, including our guests and our teams for sure, have had a lot of fun doing.
So, in the 25 years of the Cinnamon Club, fusion versus authenticity, innovation versus tradition, it's a very fine line. So, what is the process of threading that line like for you?
The great thing about innovation or tradition or, whichever way you want to look at it, is that very often, if you just keep doing the same thing, even if you haven't moved an inch from your position, the world might have just gone around you, and you are in two different ways. So 25 years ago when we started this was meant to be the most inauthentic Indian restaurant ever. British people didn't expect much from Indian food. Indian people would never come out and spend this kind of money on Indian restaurants. So who's this restaurant for? It was the most modern, the most ambitious, audacious, completely unnecessary concept at the time. To fast forward 20 years, say 4 or 5 years ago, I saw a list somewhere in London. It said 5 the most authentic places to eat in London, and we were one of them. And so, by doing the same thing, from one year to another, you go from being completely inauthentic to completely authentic. I don't think one can wait for other people's labels of what must be done or what is good. If you do something you really believe in, I think trends go around, fashions come around, everything else changes. In fact, quite the opposite of what people think. Nothing stays the same forever, and that's a mantra that we have lived by and stood by every single day of the last 25 years. We've always pushed boundaries. We've always tried to do new things. We've always tried to do something different. Never repeat. But equally, the more things change, the more they also remain the same. So it's just the way life works. I love innovation, but in many ways, for anybody to innovate or do something good, first they have to master the traditions. I think we were able to do whatever we were able to do, and it never lost its root because our roots in the experience and in the storytelling is so deep that we never were afraid of completely losing our identity. And I suspect if you love something deep enough and understand it and execute it over a period of time, I think the boundaries between innovation and tradition, and between fusion and creativity, or whichever way you want to look at it, these boundaries, they just keep shifting all the time.
Very interesting. Was there one dish that you would say was a favorite that might have really mastered this threading of the needle between authenticity and tradition and all these other aspects?
So one of the things that I kind of put help at notice when I was doing my research on Indian restaurant menus in London at the time. So forgive me a bit because we talked about 1999 here, and there were no mobile phones with internet and what have you.
And I was 3 years old.
So I was doing my research a little bit on what kind of menus. They said there were probably 4 or 5 really good Indian restaurants. You could name them on your hats. I couldn't help but notice how similar the menus were, and how there was a format to Indian restaurant menus in the day where they needed to have like some 80 items on the menu, and every ingredient that you would think of, and it was essentially lamb, chicken, fish, and prawn. But then every ingredient had like 4, 5, 6 versions of the things. So you could have a prawn bhuna, prawn jalfrezi, prawn madras, prawn whatever, goa, balcha, whatever. It's like such a formulaic way of presenting something, which kind of just didn't make sense to me because I thought, if you've got 100 things on your menu, and you only serve 100 people, it's very likely that there will be a time when somebody will order a lobster or tandoori or whatever, and you'll be stuck inside a chest freezer. It was probably my worst nightmare that you're stuck inside a chest freezer, dig into it, and you're trying to find that last lobster or the lobster that we last saw 6 months ago or whatever. Because there's no way you can have all of this stuff fresh all the time. So it was probably the worst thing that one can have is like give yourself a menu that you just cannot execute at the highest form. But having this smaller menu that you could print every night meant that, your menus were always stretched to, it's brilliant. You were only serving what was best and in season. And also you were only doing with it what you felt at the time was the best way of expressing that ingredient. And this sort of starting from a point of respect for your prime produce, because people are making that choice based on the quality of the produce and the description of the produce. See, people want turbot and they're paying £20 for it at the time. It was because they liked the taste of turbot and because it was fresh up to British Post. So we needed to learn. That was something that was very central to our way of thinking about food, thinking about dishes. It's something that also translated very well because then when we're going to buy chicken, you're not just buying any chicken, but you want to find out, which breed is this? So is this a black leg more for chicken? Yes, because if I'm using a better quality chicken, I will end up with a better quality product at the end. It's exactly the same thing when the seasons came and when it was the right time to use game. That ethos of using very good quality ingredient and giving people something new. People were the first restaurants to introduce game in our cuisine, and I'm pretty proud of it. Just knock on wood. It's one of the things that we're really famous for. Dishes like pigeon, roast, like venison, pheasant. You don't come across it in many restaurants, even now, even after 25 years. And I think the simple answer is not because people don't like it or love it. It is a slightly niche ingredient. It's not something very mainstream. But for most discernible diners, if you're looking for a different experience, rather than just the regulation lamb, chicken, fish, prawn, then this is a very welcome addition and when in season. It's something that we are very proud of. We absolutely love cooking again. I think that again exemplifies the kind of cooking that we believe.
Do you think that through all that entire journey and over the last 25 years that Indian food and Indian cuisine, Indian dining in London has finally transcended that boundary of just the curry house?
Yeah, I don't know why we say just the curry house, and including myself. 25 years ago, I would have paid anything not to be called a curry house. And for a number of years, we did not have a single curry on the menu because we thought that was perhaps it had a perception of perhaps not being premium enough, or not being special enough, or not being special occasion enough. Whereas the longer I've done this and been in this business, I've learned that there was nothing wrong with curry houses. In fact, it might be something that I might reclaim myself. In the last 25 years, I've been involved in 6 cookbooks, and I don't think there's any surprise that 3 of them have the title curry on there. It's because it is a genre of our cooking that has adapted so well. It is loved so much wherever in the world. I think there's no shame in the word curry. In fact, I might even reclaim the term curry house. Well, may or may not, but I think there is something a lot more loving in being seen as the home of curry. I would like to be that home curry.
So 25 years is a lifetime in the restaurant industry.
Yes.
Is it what I would assume? Apologies.
It is the lifetime in boys industries.
It's hard. It's true. It's a lot. But did you see yourself making it this far when you first started out?
I don't know. I don't think life works like that.
Okay.
And although I did always want to, when we first started this, we wanted to create not just a restaurant that was there for X amount of time, or for it wasn't a restaurant just for a finite amount of time. Most of the people, when they can set up a business, if you ask any founder, anything, any entrepreneur, anybody who's starting off something new, the vision is always that this is something that should go on forever. I think most great things, can survive that test of time. They evolve, they meander, they go on to a journey. They, sometimes become bigger, sometimes not necessarily so, but they always become better. Because without becoming better each day, every day, I don't think many things go through this journey of being 20, 25 years or whatever. So whether or not I thought about it, I dreamt it or whatever, I don't think that is material. What is material is that we had been on this journey, and it's been a great one that I had enjoyed thoroughly, and so has my team. And I'm incredibly proud of the number of things that we've kind of managed to do, but it's on a very principled, a very fundamental level, changing the way people perceive Indian food in this country. Deeply. In fact, the kind of contribution that a restaurant like this, the Cinema Club, had on the dining scene today in London, you can't help but notice the impact that it's had. So just in terms of the kind of restaurants that open up now, and the kind of menus that people offer, and the kind of this cross-cultural cuisine and the storytelling and everything else. But more than that, also in terms of the teams, in terms of how people have grown, and the kind of contribution it's made to the restaurant landscape in the UK and in London and beyond, is incredible. Most really good places you go to, good Indian restaurants and really good chefs, a lot of them you will be able to trace their journey back to, or at some point in time in their careers, have been a part of the Cinema Collection. It's almost as though we're as proud of the people who have left us as we are of the people who've stayed with us and been on this journey. And it actually, we couldn't ask more. So it's a brilliant place to be. We've had a lot of fun doing it, and we'll do it all over again if I had to.
I mean, it's very interesting to hear about the longevity of that journey, because it's also meant that you as well as the Cinnamon Club have made it through a lot of cycles, which include proper economic cycles, whether it's 2008 or economic crisis, whether it's COVID, just so many of these challenges that you and Cinnamon Club have made it through. What is the secret to that longevity?
The secret, you're absolutely right. Hospitality is one of those things where anyone sneezes anywhere in the world, hospitality catches the cold. And we talk about cycles as though this whole boom and bust cycle and everything to do with whether it's travel, whether it's business, it's the economy, it's the airline, the tourism, everything affects hospitality. But the secret, if you ask me, or the secret sauce, as many say these days, I think there is no other secret other than, and the first and the principle and the most fundamental one, being wanting to do it. If you really want to navigate your way through something, you will find a way. It's about always looking for a way to do something different, to do something better, create something, create something which is constantly trying to improve itself and trying to do better than it was yesterday. It's just the want to do that. I think that is, I know it's not sexy, I know it's not a hack, but it is a thing.
No. If you could speak to yourself of 25 years ago, is there any advice that you would give yourself?
I don't know if I think back at 25 years ago, I don't think I'll give myself any advice, because I know I was really bad at taking advice. I wasn't good at it because I was hell-bent on doing everything that everybody said we shouldn't be doing. And because I was such a contrarian, I know there's no point saying anything because I wouldn't listen to it.
You'd go back and tell yourself, be complacent. Better you wouldn't. Just in this time, do you think there's one thing about the hospitality industry that has just remained unchanged?
I know a lot has changed in the hospitality industry. A lot. Just everything about reason why people go out, the kind of, their needs, doing a huge difference in generational sort of approach towards hospitality has changed. Quite a lot has changed. Including the fact that, when I started off, we started off with the mantra that the guest is always right. 25 years on, I had no shame in admitting that the guest is not always right.
Yeah.
They aren't, and maybe they should, but they aren't. And we can't tell our teams what is not true anymore, that the guest is always right. It isn't. It's our job to make sure we do the best we do, but equally, it's really important that that relationship, that interaction is more than a transaction. It is one that involves respect and, reward. And it works both ways. It's something that we weren't probably taught when we were starting up in hospitality. But I think that is one thing that's just changed tremendously. I don't think there is any excuse for teams or, our people to receive anything less than respect from the customer. It's just the way it is. The thing that hasn't changed though is that in the main, no matter how, you could find exceptions everywhere, but in the main, the places that really do well, or the restaurants that really survived the test of time, or the chefs that have done well, or the teams that have done really well, are the ones that want to make people happy. And in that sense, hospitality hasn't changed. You must want to make other people happy. If you are not, if you're simply in it to have a startup, perhaps sell it out one day, make a lot of multiples of your EBITDA, whatever, I think this is still a very hard and wrong business to get into. And in that sense, hospitality hasn't changed. And I think it's much better for it.
Working alongside you and your team is multiple members who've been here for almost as long as you have, or even since day one in some cases. That people first approach that you have, what has driven it and why is it still something that you keep front and center of your values today?
It's worked really well for our teams. It's because we've always had maintained this ethos of, the first opportunity. We didn't want to just do things a certain way because everybody else had done it. We wanted to grow. We wanted to make sure that people got the opportunity. People who were within our teams got that opportunity first. And I think it's got something to do with the longevity as well as the loyalty that the Cinema Collection enjoys in terms of its teams, because everybody is on a journey, or has been mostly on a journey. Some of these journeys have meant that people have grown within the organization. Some of these journeys meant that people have moved away from us and gone and done bigger, better things in their lives. At the core of this has been our people. We would not be who we are without our teams. You could argue the other way around and say that we are whatever we are because of our teams. That is the bit that has kind of set us apart from most teams. We very early on, we also decided that, we weren't just about teams. One of the things that we identified very early on was that for us, it was important to look after all our stakeholders, not just our guests, but also our suppliers, our teams. It was really important to understand that everybody needs something out of this, right? Supplier needs to be treated with respect. The customer, of course, has got to be looked after, and must want to return. The teams have to be looked after if they want to grow, and if we want to grow as a brand as well. But you do all these things and you don't look after shareholders, that won't work either. So the fact that, it was about valuing every stakeholder in the business was something quite intrinsic to us. The people is the one side we see, and such a great example.
It's also such a key part of your sustainability rating at the moment as well. So
Totally, yeah. I think, totally. I mean, this is the other thing about longevity, I think, is that you can't just be around if you haven't kind of taken care of some of these things are so important. So looking after your people, the journeys, their growth, validation of what they do, reason why people come. Very often say, you take care of the why and then it will take care of the how and the when and the what or whatever else. Very often people need to, we realized very earlier on in our journey that we couldn't have said, we're going to make all the money ourselves and then we're going to see when we have enough, then we'll do something for our teams and we'll do something for our, for charity or whatever. We knew that it's never going to be enough. So if you wanted to be on that journey, you really needed to be able to find a way of doing all of it all the time simultaneously. So you got to make a business successful. You got to fill your restaurant with happy guests who want to return. You also want to have happy teams who are wanting to come to work and do all of this. You also want to do. I learned about 15 years ago that young people in our teams were so much more motivated by whatever we did for charity. Very often people came in on a Sunday when we were hosting a charitable event. And, they worked those extra hours or whatever. They didn't mind it one bit because they had such a great time. They knew that they were contributing to something which was so much more valuable to so many other people. And I think that brought out the best in people. We realized that it wasn't just about us helping a charity, but actually helping our people feel better about themselves as well. And so, it goes. Sustainability is a really big part because if you aren't sustainable, you don't care to be sustainable, I don't think you can be around for that long. So we're incredibly proud of our 3-star sustainability rating. I don't know how many, I don't think there are many restaurants that have it still. We have it and we love it.